The morning sunshine cast long shadows across Westfield Academy's brick walkways as a slender woman clutched her worn leather satchel to her chest. Maylin took a deep breath before pushing open the heavy oak doors of the administration building. This was her first day as a substitute teacher at one of the most prestigious private schools in the region, and despite her qualifications, her stomach twisted with nerves. "You must be the new English substitute," said a brisk voice. The school secretary barely looked up from her computer. "Principal Dawson is expecting you. Down the hall, last door on the right." Maylin nodded with a quiet, "Thank you," her voice barely audible in the bustling front office. As she walked down the hallway, student artwork and trophy cases lined the walls, evidence of Westfield's renowned arts program. She paused briefly by a glass display showcasing photos of young musicians on grand stages, their faces bright with accomplishment. Principal Dawson was a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Ms. Lin, welcome," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm and businesslike. "We're grateful you could step in on such short notice. Ms. Patterson's medical leave caught us off guard." "I'm happy to help," Maylin replied, her soft voice carrying a hint of an accent. She'd worked hard over the years to blend in, to become unremarkable. "You'll be covering her English literature classes for at least the next semester. Your credentials are quite impressive. University of Michigan, correct?" Maylin nodded. Her literature degree had been her second path in life, one chosen during long, sleepless nights after everything had changed. Few people knew about her first life, her first love, music, and that was exactly how she wanted it. "Let me introduce you to some of the faculty," Principal Dawson said, guiding her from the office. The teacher's lounge was buzzing with morning conversation and the smell of coffee. Faces turned toward the door as they entered, curious eyes assessing the newcomer. Maylin felt herself shrinking under their gaze, her shoulders hunching slightly as they had done since the accident. "Everyone, this is Ms. Lin. She'll be covering for Ms. Patterson while she recovers." The principal pointed out different teachers, their names washing over Maylin in a nervous blur. A short, balding man with wire-rimmed glasses approached them, coffee in hand. "Welcome aboard. I'm Thomas, History Department. If you need anything, just holler." His kindness was a brief respite before a booming voice cut across the room. "Ah, the new substitute has arrived." The crowd seemed to part as a tall man with salt and pepper hair strode toward them. His posture screamed confidence from his squared shoulders to his lifted chin. "Richard Harmon," Principal Dawson explained in a hushed tone, "head of our music department and one of our most distinguished faculty members." The man didn't extend his hand. Instead, he looked Maylin up and down, as if assessing a student who had arrived late to class. "English literature, is it? Not exactly the cornerstone of Westfield's reputation, but necessary nonetheless." Principal Dawson cleared her throat. "Professor Harmon's students have won national competitions 3 years running. Our music program is what puts Westfield on the map." "Indeed," Professor Harmon agreed, straightening his already perfectly straight tie. "And what musical background do you have, Ms. Lin? All our faculty contribute to our arts appreciation curriculum in some way." Maylin's heart skipped a beat. "I have some basic knowledge," she said, the lie feeling bitter on her tongue. 6 years ago, she'd been preparing for a concert tour across Europe. 6 years ago, her fingers had danced across piano keys daily, creating sounds that moved audiences to tears. 6 years ago, her husband had still been alive, his cello a perfect companion to her piano. Basic," Harmon repeated with thinly veiled disdain. "Well, I suppose not everyone can be versed in the finer arts. We have a faculty meeting this afternoon, 3 o'clock sharp in the conference room. Don't be late, Ms. Lin." With that, he turned and walked away, several other teachers trailing in his wake like planets orbiting a sun. "Don't mind him," Thomas said, reappearing at her side. "Richard's brilliant, but, well, let's just say people skills aren't his forte." "It's fine," Maylin assured him, though her knuckles had turned white around the handle of her satchel. The morning passed in a whirlwind of new faces and information. Maylin's first class, junior year British literature, went smoothly enough. The students were respectful, if not a bit aloof, testing her knowledge with probing questions about Shakespeare's sonnets. Her second class proved more challenging, with several students clearly attempting to see how far they could push the new substitute. By lunchtime, Mei Lin needed space to breathe. Rather than joining the busy teacher's cafeteria, she found herself wandering the empty hallways, eventually drawn toward the sound of music. The school's music wing was impressive. Practice rooms with soundproofed walls, a recording studio, and at its heart, a small recital hall. The door to one practice room stood ajar, and Mei Lin paused, listening to a student struggle through a Chopin etude. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, muscle memory awakening at the familiar piece. She'd performed it countless times, could feel the weight of each key beneath her fingers even now. The student was rushing the middle section, missing the subtle emotion woven through the notes. "Excuse me, are you lost?" Mei Lin startled, turning to find a young woman, clearly a music teacher based on the violin case she carried. "I'm sorry, I was just..." Mei Lin gestured vaguely at the practice room. "You must be the new English sub. I'm Liz, strings department." Her smile was genuine, a refreshing change from the morning's reception. "Beautiful, isn't it? Even when they're still learning." Mei Lin nodded. "Yes, it is. Do you play?" Liz asked. For a moment, Mei Lin considered telling the truth, but old habits won out. "No, not really, I just appreciate it." "Well, you're welcome to visit any time. Music should be for everyone, despite what some of our more traditional faculty might think." Liz's knowing look made it clear who she meant. After lunch, Mei Lin taught 2 more classes before making her way to the faculty meeting. She slipped into the conference room exactly at 3, taking a seat near the back. Professor Harmon was already at the front, arranging papers with meticulous precision. As the meeting progressed, Mei Lin remained silent, taking notes and observing. The school calendar, budget concerns, and upcoming parent-teacher conferences were all discussed in tedious detail. Just as she thought the meeting might be wrapping up, Professor Harmon took the floor again. "Now, regarding our spring recital," he said, his voice commanding attention. "As you all know, it's our showcase event of the year. Parents, board members, and potential donors all attend." The room filled with murmurs of acknowledgement. "Unfortunately, I've just learned that Angela Wu has mononucleosis and will be unable to perform her piano solo." He sighed dramatically. "Which leaves us with a significant gap in our program." Mei Lin kept her eyes down, focusing intensely on her notepad. Something about the ensuing silence made her skin prickle. "I've been thinking," Professor Harmon continued, "that this presents an opportunity. Westfield Academy prides itself on faculty excellence in all areas, not just teaching. Perhaps it's time we demonstrated that more publicly." Thomas raised his hand. "What are you suggesting, Richard?" "I'm suggesting, dear colleagues, that we should fill the gap with faculty performances." A smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "After all, if we expect excellence from our students, shouldn't we model it ourselves?" Several teachers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I play piano," offered a middle-aged woman from the math department. "Wonderful, Diane. What's the most challenging piece you've mastered?" Harmon asked. "Well, I wouldn't say mastered, but I can play some simple Mozart sonatas." Harmon's disappointment was palpable. "We need something that showcases true virtuosity, not a beginner's recital piece." His gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on each face before stopping abruptly. "What about our new addition? Ms. Lin, do you have any hidden talents?" Mei Lin felt blood rush to her face as all eyes turned toward her. No, I'm afraid not." "Come now," Harmon pressed, his smile growing sharper. "Everyone has something to contribute. I refuse to believe an educated woman such as yourself has no artistic capabilities whatsoever." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Mei Lin could hear her heartbeat in her ears. "I believe in throwing people into the deep end," Harmon announced. "Ms. Lin, I'm assigning you a piece for the recital. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. We have the sheet music in our library." His eyes glinted with challenge. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to admit now that you're not up to Westfield's standards." Mei Lin sat frozen, her mind racing. Rachmaninoff's Third was one of the most notoriously difficult piano pieces ever written. It was also the last piece she had performed before the accident, before she'd locked her grief away along with her talent. "Richard, that's completely unreasonable," Liz objected. "You can't expect—" "I expect all faculty to contribute to the excellence of this institution," Harmon interrupted. "The recital is in 6 weeks. That should be ample time for preparation." Maylin knew she should speak up, should refuse this transparent attempt at humiliation. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'll try." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Even Harmon looked taken aback, clearly having expected her to decline. "Well, then," he recovered quickly. "That's settled." Meeting adjourned. As teachers gathered their belongings, Maylin remained seated, her mind far away. For 6 years, she had avoided pianos, had walked the long way around music stores, had changed radio stations at the first hint of a classical piece. Now she would have to face the music that had once been her entire world, and the memories that came with it. Outside the conference room, Thomas caught up with her. "Don't let him bully you. Nobody would blame you for backing out." Maylin looked up at him, something shifting in her eyes. "Thank you, but I think maybe it's time I stopped backing away from challenges." As she walked toward the parking lot, the late afternoon sun painted the school buildings gold. In her mind, distant piano. Notes began to play, tentative at first, then growing stronger. For the first time in years, Maylin didn't immediately silence them. That night, Maylin sat in her small apartment staring at her phone. The screen displayed a music store's number, her thumb hovering over the call button. After 6 years of silence, the thought of touching piano keys again made her stomach twist into knots. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to herself, setting the phone down. Her tiny living room held no piano. She'd sold her baby grand after the accident, unable to bear its silent accusation. Now she would need somewhere to practice. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone again and dialed. "Hello? Rivera's Music. Shop. Hi, I'm wondering if you rent practice rooms." The next morning, Maylin arrived at school earlier than necessary. Dark circles underlined her eyes, evidence of a night spent tossing and turning, haunted by memories of concert halls and standing ovations, of her husband Tao's smile as he watched her perform from the wings. As she walked down the empty hallway, toward her classroom, a melody drifted from the music wing. Curiosity pulled her feet in that direction. Through the window of a practice room door, she spotted Professor Harmon leaning over a young student at the piano, his face stern as the girl struggled through a piece. "No, no, no." His voice carried through the door. "Your interpretation lacks any emotional depth. Do you even understand what Debussy was trying to convey?" The student, a girl no more than 15, blinked rapidly, clearly fighting tears. Again. From the beginning. Maylin stepped away before he could notice her watching. In her classroom, she arranged her teaching materials with methodical precision, trying to ignore the anger bubbling inside her. Harmon's teaching style reminded her of her own childhood piano instructor, brilliant but brutal, leaving psychological bruises alongside technical perfection. Her first class arrived, sleepy-eyed teenagers shuffling to their seats. Maylin had planned a discussion on The Great Gatsby, but found herself talking about the green light, about reaching for impossible dreams with unexpected passion. "Miss Lin," a girl with purple-streaked hair asked, "have you ever wanted something so badly it hurt?" The question caught her off guard. Images flashed through her mind, concert halls, recording contracts, magazine covers featuring her and Tao as classical music's power couple. "Yes," she answered honestly. "But sometimes life takes unexpected turns." "Did you get it? The thing you wanted?" Maylin looked at the curious faces around her. "I did. And then I lost it." The lunch bell saved her from further questions. As students filed out, Thomas appeared in her doorway. "Survived your first day, I see," he said cheerfully. "Care to join a few of us for lunch?" In the teacher's lounge, Maylin sat with Thomas, Liz from the music department, and a science teacher named David. Their conversation flowed easily until Professor Harmon entered the room. Our piano virtuoso in training," he announced, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Have you started practicing yet, Ms. Lin? Rachmaninoff waits for no one." All eyes turned toward their table. Mei Lin focused on her sandwich. "I'm working. On it," she said quietly. "You know," Liz interjected, "there's really no need to put Mei Lin through this, Richard. I have a violinist who could easily step in." "Nonsense. Ms. Lin has accepted the challenge." He smiled thinly. "Unless, of course, she's reconsidering." Something in his smug expression sparked a flame of determination in Mei Lin's chest. "No, reconsideration needed, Professor Harmon. I look forward to performing." His eyebrows lifted slightly, the only indication of his surprise. With a curt nod, he moved to join another table. "That man," Thomas muttered, shaking his head. "I swear, he lives to make others uncomfortable." "Why is he like that?" Mei Lin asked. Liz leaned forward. "Rumor has it he was quite the piano prodigy himself, destined for greatness. Then something happened. An injury, some say. Others claim stage fright. Either way, he never performed professionally. Now he lives through his students," David added. "Pushes them relentlessly. The successful ones worship him, the others—" He trailed off. "Speaking of which," Liz said, her voice gentler, "are you really going to go through with this, Mei Lin? No one would blame you for backing out. Rachmaninoff's third is, well, it's infamously difficult." Mei Lin took a sip of water. "I'll manage," she said simply. That evening after school, Mei Lin stood outside Rivera's music shop, gathering her courage. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. The familiar smell of polished wood and sheet music hit her like a physical force, stopping her in her tracks. "Can I help you?" A middle-aged woman approached, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I called yesterday about practice room rental." "Oh, yes. I'm Elena Rivera. Come on back, I'll show you our spaces." Mei Lin followed Elena past rows of gleaming instruments. Her eyes caught on a beautiful upright piano, her fingers itching to touch it. "We have 3 practice rooms," Elena explained. "Each has a piano, though I must warn you, they're not concert quality." "That's fine," Mei Lin said. "I'm just a beginner." Elena opened the door to a small room with a slightly worn upright piano. "This one's free now if you'd like to try it." Alone in the room, Mei Lin approached the piano slowly, as if it might bite. She set her bag down and stood looking at the keyboard, its black and white pattern both inviting and terrifying. Slowly, she pulled out the bench and sat down. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. When she finally lowered her right hand to play a simple C major chord, the sound resonated through her body like an electric current. She pulled back immediately, startled by her own emotional response. Taking a deep breath, she tried again, this time playing a simple scale. Her fingers remembered, even if her heart wasn't ready. She played another scale, then another, her technique rusty but the muscle memory intact. For nearly an hour, she worked through basic exercises, reacquainting herself with the instrument she had once known as intimately as her own heartbeat. She didn't dare attempt anything more complex, not yet. The wall around her memories was too fragile. When she emerged from the practice room, Elena looked up from the counter. "How did it go?" "Fine," Mei Lin said, her voice slightly hoarse. "I'd like to reserve this room 3 evenings a week, if possible." "Of course. Same time?" As Mei Lin walked to her car, she felt exhausted but also strangely lighter, as if she'd set down a heavy burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The next few days fell into a pattern. Teach during the day, avoid Professor Harmon when possible, practice basic piano techniques in the evenings. She hadn't yet touched the Rachmaninoff piece, couldn't bring herself to look at the sheet music that Liz had quietly left in her mailbox. On Friday, Professor Harmon cornered her in the copy room. "Ms. Lin," he said, blocking the doorway, "I'm curious about your progress. The recital committee meets next week to finalize the program. I'd hate to have promised something that won't materialize." Mei Lin continued collating her papers. "I'm practicing, Professor." "Wonderful. Then you won't mind giving us a little preview at Monday's faculty meeting. Just a few minutes to assure everyone you're up to the task. Her hand stilled. Monday? Is that a problem? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Surely you must have mastered at least the first movement by now. They both knew she couldn't possibly have done so, not if she were truly a beginner. The first movement alone was technically demanding and emotionally complex. I'll prepare something, she said, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. That night, Lynn finally opened the Rachmaninoff score. The familiar note stared back at her, simultaneously a dear friend and a painful reminder. This was the piece she and Tao had been preparing for when their car was hit. This was the piece she had been practicing when the police came to her door. Her hands shook as she placed the music on the stand at Rivera's. For several minutes she just stared at it, her mind flooding with memories. Tao teasing her about her obsession with perfecting the cadenza, his warm laughter as they practiced late. Into the night, his gentle criticism when she rushed through emotional passages. I can't do this, she whispered. But even as the words left her mouth, her fingers found the opening notes. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, she began to play. Her technique was rusty, her timing imperfect. But something deeper took over, the part of her that had once lived and breathed this music. She didn't hear the door open slightly, didn't notice Elena pausing outside to listen, a look of astonishment crossing her face. Lynn played for nearly 3 hours, losing herself in the music for the first time in 6 years. When she finally stopped, her fingers ached and tears streamed down her face, but she felt something she hadn't felt since the accident. Alive. The weekend passed in a blur of practice. Lynn canceled her Sunday rental, knowing she needed to rest her hands before Monday's impromptu performance. Instead, she spent the day mentally rehearsing, her fingers moving silently through passages as she sat in her apartment. Monday morning arrived with steel gray skies and a promise of rain. Lynn dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue blouse and dark pants. Professional, unremarkable, except today, she added a small pin that Tao had given her after her first major concert, a tiny silver piano. For courage, she whispered, touching it lightly. The school day crawled by. Her students noticed her distraction, exchanging glances when she lost her place in the discussion twice. By the time the faculty meeting arrived, Lynn's nerves were stretched to breaking point. She slipped into the conference room, taking her usual seat near the back. A small electric keyboard had been set up at the front, nowhere near adequate for Rachmaninoff, but Professor Harmon clearly wasn't concerned with giving her a fair chance. As the meeting began, Lynn half listened to announcements about upcoming events and budget adjustments. Her mind was elsewhere, running through difficult passages, feeling phantom keys beneath her fingers. And now, Professor Harmon's voice cut through her thoughts. As promised, our newest faculty member will demonstrate her progress on the Rachmaninoff piece for our spring recital. All eyes turned toward Lynn. As she stood and walked to the front, she caught sight of Liz giving her an encouraging thumbs up and Thomas mouthing, "You've got this." The keyboard looked tiny and toy-like compared to what the piece deserved. Professor Harmon stood nearby, arms crossed, a small smirk playing at his lips. "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Lynn," he said, his tone suggesting he didn't expect much. Lynn sat down, adjusting the height of the chair. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining Tao standing beside her, his cello case in hand ready to cheer her on as he always had. "I'll be playing part of the first movement," she said quietly. Her fingers touched the keys, and she began to play. The sound quality was poor, the action of the keys nothing like a real piano. But none of that mattered once the music took over. She started conservatively, playing well but not extraordinarily, a part of her still hiding, still afraid. But as she continued, something shifted. Her body remembered what her heart had tried to forget. The joy of the music, the thrill of bringing a composer's vision to life. Her playing grew more confident, more passionate, her fingers dancing across the keys with increasing virtuosity. The room fell completely silent. Even Professor Harmon's smug expression faltered, replaced by confusion, then disbelief. When Mei Lin finally stopped, not because she couldn't continue, but because she had made her point, she looked up to find her colleagues staring at her, with wide eyes. "That was," Thomas began, then seemed at a loss for words. "Impossible," Professor Harmon finished, his voice barely audible. "Who are you?" A heavy silence hung in the conference room. Mei Lin's fingers still rested lightly on the keyboard, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't meant to reveal so much of herself, but the music had pulled it out of her like a confession. Professor Harmon recovered first, his face transitioning from shock to something harder. "Clearly you've misrepresented your musical background, Ms. Lin." His voice was low, almost dangerous. "Where did you study?" Mei Lin stood up, smoothing her pants with damp palms. "I took lessons as a child," she said vaguely. "No one plays Rachmaninoff like that from childhood lessons," Liz interjected, her voice filled with awe. "That was professional level playing." The other teachers murmured in agreement, several nodding enthusiastically. "Perhaps we should continue with the meeting," Principal Dawson suggested, eyeing the growing tension between Mei Lin and Professor Harmon. As everyone's attention shifted to budget matters, Mei Lin slipped back to her seat, keeping her eyes down. She could feel Professor Harmon's gaze burning into her, questions forming behind his piercing eyes. After the meeting, Mei Lin tried to escape quickly, but a crowd of teachers surrounded her in the hallway. "Where did you learn to play like that? Have you performed professionally? Why are you teaching English instead of music?" The questions came rapid fire, pushing against the walls she'd built around her past. Mei Lin took a step back, feeling cornered. "Please," she said quietly, "it's been a long day. I'd rather not discuss it." Thomas appeared at her side, sensing her discomfort. "All right, everyone, give her some space." He turned to Mei Lin. "Need an escort to your car?" Gratefully, she nodded. Outside, the evening air had turned chilly. Mei Lin pulled her jacket tighter as they walked across the parking lot. "You don't have to talk about it," Thomas said, breaking the silence. "But that wasn't just good playing back there. That was extraordinary." Mei Lin stared at the ground, watching their shadows stretch before them in the security lights. "It was a long time ago. Music like that doesn't just disappear," Thomas said gently. "Whatever happened, whatever made you stop, it didn't take away your gift." When they reached her car, Mei Lin turned to him. "Thank you for the rescue." "Anytime." He hesitated. "Just so you know, Harmon's not going to let this go. He's like a bloodhound when he senses something interesting." "I can handle Professor Harmon," Mei Lin said with more confidence than she felt. That night sleep eluded her. She paced her small apartment, alternating between regret at revealing herself and relief at reconnecting with the music. Around midnight, curiosity got the better of her. Opening her laptop, she typed her former name into a search engine, Mei Lin Chen. The results appeared immediately. Concert reviews, interviews, photographs of a younger version of herself in elegant gowns, sitting at grand pianos on stages around the world. And in many of the photos, standing beside her with his cello, was Tao. One headline caught her eye. "Classical power couple's meteoric rise continues." The article was dated just weeks before the accident. She clicked on it, scanning the enthusiastic praise of their musical partnership, the speculation about their upcoming European tour. Further down the search results, the tone of the headlines changed. "Tragedy strikes musical duo. Renowned cellist killed in car crash. Pianist Mei Lin Chen cancels all performances following husband's death." She closed the laptop, unable to read more. The memories were too vivid. The screeching tires, the shattering glass, waking up in the hospital to the news that Tao was gone. The months that followed were a blur of grief, culminating in her disastrous attempt to return to the stage 8. Months after the accident, a performance so anxiety-ridden she'd had to leave the stage mid-sonata, never to return. After that, She'd changed her professional name, moved across the country, and rebuilt her life around literature instead of music. No one in her new life knew about Mei Lin Chen, the piano prodigy. Until now. The next morning, Mei Lin arrived at school to find a handwritten note in her faculty mailbox. My office, lunch period. R. Harmon. She crumpled the note, then smoothed it out again. Better to face him directly than wonder what he was thinking. Her morning classes passed in a fog. Students noticed her distraction, exchanging glances when she asked them to turn to a page they'd already covered the day before. When the lunch bell rang, she took a deep breath and headed to the music wing. Professor Harmon's office reflected his personality, meticulously organized with awards prominently displayed. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, watching. As she entered, "Close the door, please." Mei Lin did as asked, then remained standing. "You wanted to see me? I spent quite some time last night researching you, Ms. Lin." He picked up a folder. "Or should I say Ms. Chen?" Her stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. "My legal name is Lin now." "Yes, I discovered that." He opened the folder, revealing printed articles and photographs, her past spread, out before him. "What I can't understand is why one of the most promising concert pianists of her generation is hiding in a high school English department. That's personal, is it?" He leaned forward. "When you're wasting extraordinary talent, I'd say it becomes a matter of public concern." Anger flickered through Mei Lin. "My talent is mine to use or not use as I choose." "Is it fear?" he pressed. "The articles mentioned your disastrous comeback attempt after your husband's death." The casual way he referred to the most painful period of her life made her flinch. "Professor Harmon, I appreciate your interest, but my past is exactly that. Past. And yet yesterday you played as if nothing had changed." His voice softened unexpectedly. "That kind of gift doesn't come along often, Ms. Lin. To abandon it seems criminal." Mei Lin closed her eyes briefly. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." The genuine curiosity in his voice surprised her. For a moment she considered telling him everything, about the panic attacks that still gripped her when she thought of performing, about how music had become inextricably linked with loss in her mind. Instead, she said, "I'll still play the piece for your recital. Beyond that, my musical career is not up for discussion." Frustration flickered across his face. "Fine, but I've taken the liberty of moving your performance to the closing slot. Our final piece." "That wasn't our agreement." "Consider it an executive decision. The best comes last, after all." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And I've arranged for you to practice on the grand piano in the recital hall. The janitor will let you in after hours." Before she could protest, he stood up. "That's all, Ms. Lin. I look forward to hearing your progress." That afternoon, students whispered as she passed in the hallway. News of her hidden talent had spread throughout the school with typical teenage efficiency. In her final class of the day, a quiet boy who rarely participated raised his hand. "Ms. Lin?" he asked. "Is it true you're actually a famous pianist?" The class fell silent, all eyes on her. Mei Lin set down her chalk. "I used to play piano, yes. But I'm your English teacher now and we're discussing Fitzgerald's use of symbolism." "But why would you stop if you were really good?" asked a girl in the front row. "My mom says you played like a professional yesterday." For a moment, Mei Lin was tempted to dismiss the question. But looking at their curious young faces, she saw something else. Genuine interest. Maybe even understanding. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "life takes unexpected turns. The things we love can become complicated." "Because of pain?" asked the quiet boy, surprising her with his insight. Mei Lin nodded slowly. "Yes, because of pain. My dad was a baseball player," another student volunteered. "He got injured and couldn't play anymore. He didn't even watch games for like 2 years. Said it hurt too much." "Does he watch now?" Mei Lin asked. The student nodded. "Yeah, Says it still hurts sometimes, but he missed it more than it hurt. Their simple wisdom stayed with Mei Lin as she drove to Rivera's music shop that evening. Elena greeted her with new respect in her eyes. "I didn't realize who you were," she said, a hint of awe in her voice. "My daughter showed me videos of your performances online. You were magnificent." "Thank you," Mei Lin said, uncomfortable with the recognition. "Is my practice room available?" "Of course, I've tuned the piano specially." In the practice room, Mei Lin found fresh flowers on top of the piano, a small gesture that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She sat down and began to play, working through the Rachmaninoff with more confidence than before. As she played, she allowed herself to remember the good parts. Tao's pride when she mastered a difficult passage, their shared exhilaration after a successful performance, the quiet moments backstage when they'd hold hands before walking out together. She was so absorbed in the music and memories that she didn't notice the door cracking open or the small audience gathering in the hallway, drawn by the sound of her playing. When she finally stopped, exhausted but satisfied, applause erupted from outside the room. Startled, she turned to find Elena and several customers watching, their faces alight with appreciation. "I'm sorry." Elena apologized, though she didn't look particularly sorry. "You're playing. We couldn't help ourselves." Mei Lin felt her face grow warm, but strangely, the panic she expected didn't come. Instead, she felt a small glow of pride, something she hadn't experienced in years. The next day, Professor Harmon caught her in the hallway between classes. "I've heard you've been practicing at a local music shop." Mei Lin frowned. "Have you been checking up on me?" "This is a small town, Ms. Lin. News travels." He studied her face. "If you're serious about this performance, you should be practicing on a proper grand piano. Come to the recital hall tonight at 7. I've arranged everything with security." Though suspicious of his motives, Mei Lin couldn't deny the appeal of playing on a real grand piano again. After school, she found herself drawn to the recital hall, arriving a few minutes before 7. The hall was empty, the stage lit by a single spotlight illuminating a gleaming black grand piano. Mei Lin walked slowly down the aisle, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The piano was magnificent, a Steinway concert grand, its lid raised and ready. She climbed the steps to the stage, her hand trailing along the smooth wood of the piano as she circled it. This was what she had been missing, what no digital keyboard or upright could replicate. The presence, the power, the possibility. Sitting down, she positioned her hands above the keys. The familiar routine of concert preparation came back to her automatically, adjusting the bench, straightening her posture, breathing deeply. She began to play, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The sound was glorious, filling the hall with rich, complex tones that the practice room piano could never produce. Lost in the music, she didn't notice the figure sitting in the shadows at the back of the hall, watching her with intense concentration. Professor Harmon leaned forward, his expression unreadable as Mei Lin's playing echoed through the empty space, bringing to life the notes that had once defined her existence. The final notes of Rachmaninoff's concerto hung in the air of the empty recital hall. Mei Lin sat motionless at the piano, her hands still poised above the keys, caught in that magical moment between sound and silence. She hadn't played the piece all the way through since before the accident. Her heart raced, but not with panic, with something that felt almost like joy. A single pair of hands began to clap, the sound sharp and startling in the quiet hall. Mei Lin whirled around on the bench. Professor Harmon emerged from the shadows, at the back of the hall, walking slowly down the center aisle. "I knew it," he said, his voice echoing slightly. "I knew you were holding back yesterday." Heat rose in Mei Lin's cheeks. "You were spying on me?" "I prefer to think of it as confirming my suspicions." He climbed the steps to the stage, his expression uncharacteristically animated. "Do you have any idea how magnificent that was?" "Mei." Lin closed the piano lid gently. "I was just practicing." "Just practicing," he repeated with a short laugh. Most pianists spend their entire careers trying to achieve what you just did, just practicing. He leaned against the piano, studying her. Why are you hiding in a high school English department? With your talent. My talent is my business. She interrupted, standing up. I came here to practice privately. And yet you chose my stage, my piano. His eyes narrowed. Part of you wants to be found, Ms. Lin. Part of you is tired of hiding. His words hit uncomfortably close to home. The truth was, playing on a proper grand piano again had awakened something in her, a hunger she'd thought long dead. The recital is in 5 weeks, she said, changing the subject. Will the accompaniment be live or recorded? Professor Harmon blinked at the abrupt shift. I had planned on a recorded orchestral backing, but that will be fine. Mei Lin gathered her sheet music. If there's nothing else, I should be going. As she turned to leave, Professor Harmon said quietly, He would have wanted you to keep playing. Mei Lin froze. You don't know anything about what he would have wanted. I know enough about musicians to know that your husband wouldn't have wanted his death to silence your gift. When she didn't respond, he continued, The videos of your performances together, the way he looked at you while you played, that wasn't just love. It was reverence. Tears pricked at Mei Lin's eyes. She blinked them away, refusing to break down in front of this man. Good night, Professor Harmon. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed face. Mei Lin leaned against her car, taking deep breaths. Professor Harmon's words had stirred up memories she'd tried to bury. Tao's face as he watched her play, the pride in his eyes, the way they had communicated through music when words failed. He would have wanted you to keep playing. The thought followed her home, echoing in her mind as she tried to sleep. The next morning, Thomas caught up with her in the parking lot. I hear Harmon's got you practicing in the recital hall now. Should we be worried? Mei Lin gave a small smile. About what? I don't know. You two plotting world domination through classical music? Hardly. He just wants me to have access to a decent piano. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That's surprisingly thoughtful of him. Don't worry, he's still insufferable. Just in a different way now. Throughout the day, Mei Lin noticed changes in how people treated her. Students who had previously ignored her now watched with curious eyes. Other teachers who had barely acknowledged her existence stopped to chat. The purple-haired girl from her literature class asked if she would play something for them sometime. Maybe, Mei Lin had answered, surprised by her own response. After school, Liz caught her in the hallway. Hey, a bunch of us are going to hear the symphony this weekend. They're playing Tchaikovsky. Want to join? For years, Mei Lin had avoided live classical performances, the memories too painful. But now, with the music reawakening inside her, she found herself nodding. I'd like that. That evening, she returned to the recital hall. No sign of Professor Harmon this time, but on the piano, she found a stack of sheet music with a note. For consideration, R.H. The pile contained pieces she had once performed. Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 23, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, Beethoven's Emperor Concerto. Pieces that had once been as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. She set them aside, focusing instead on the Rachmaninoff. But as she played, her mind kept wandering to the stack. During a break, she flipped through them, memories flooding back with each familiar passage. Without thinking, she began to play the Mozart, her fingers finding the notes from memory. It was like meeting an old friend, comfortable, joyful, uncomplicated by grief. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear the door open or notice the man who slipped into the back row, a janitor's cart abandoned in the hallway. Miguel Rodriguez had been working at Westfield Academy for 3 years. At 45, he'd taken the job after his landscaping business failed, grateful for the steady paycheck that helped support his family. Most teachers barely noticed him as he emptied trash cans and swept floors, but the music coming from the recital hall had stopped him in his tracks. He sat silently, mop in hand, transported by Mei Lin's playing. When she finished the Mozart, he couldn't help himself. He applauded. Mei Lin jumped, spinning around on the bench. "Who's there?" Miguel stood up, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to interrupt. I've never heard anything so beautiful." Mei Lin recognized him now, the night janitor who always had a kind smile and a polite nod when they passed in the hallways. "It's Miguel, right?" He nodded, surprised she knew his name. "I should get back to work. I'm sorry for disturbing you." "You didn't disturb me," she said quickly. "It's nice to have an appreciative audience." Miguel hesitated, then said, "My daughter plays piano. Not like you, she's just 12, but she loves it." Something in his proud expression reminded Mei Lin of her own father, who had scraped together money for her first piano lessons. "That's wonderful. Music is a gift." That's what I tell her. But her teacher isn't very encouraging, says she doesn't have natural talent. He shook his head. "I wish she could hear you play, see what's possible with practice and heart." Mei Lin thought for a moment. "Bring her to the spring recital. I'm performing." Miguel's face lit up. "Really? She would love that. And maybe—" Mei Lin surprised herself with the words forming on her lips. "Maybe I could meet her sometime, give her some encouragement." "You would do that?" His voice was full of gratitude. Of course, musicians should support each other. After Miguel left to finish his rounds, Mei Lin sat quietly at the piano. For the first time in years, she had referred to herself as a musician, not in the past tense, but in the present. Over the next 2 weeks, Mei Lin fell into a new routine. Teaching by day, practicing by night. The music that had once been her entire world slowly reclaimed space in her life. She still had moments of grief, still felt Tao's absence most acutely when playing pieces they had performed together. But the music itself had become a comfort, rather than a reminder of loss. One evening, as she practiced, she sensed rather than heard someone enter the recital hall. Without turning around, she knew it was Professor Harmon. His footsteps had become familiar. "The phrasing in the second movement is improving," he said when she finished. "But you're still holding back in the cadenza." Mei Lin turned to face him. "Are you going to critique me every night?" "Only when necessary." He sat down in the front row. "You know, in another life, I might have been your teacher." "What do you mean?" "I taught at Juilliard for a few years before coming here. Our paths nearly crossed." Mei Lin remembered hearing his name during her time there. "You left rather suddenly, as I recall." A shadow passed over his face. "Yes, well, circumstances change." For the first time, Mei Lin felt curiosity about this difficult man. "What circumstances?" Professor Harmon was quiet for a long moment. "There was a student, exceptionally talented, perhaps the most gifted pianist I'd ever taught. He was preparing for the international Tchaikovsky competition. I pushed him hard. Too hard, some said." His voice grew distant. The pressure was too much. He had a breakdown before the competition, attempted to take his own life. Mei Lin's breath caught. "I'm sorry." He survived, thankfully, but I couldn't face teaching at that level again. I came here where the stakes were lower. His laugh was hollow, and proceeded to be exactly the same kind of demanding teacher, just with younger students. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I recognize the look in your eyes, the fear of returning to something that once caused pain." He leaned forward. "And because I think we might be able to help each other." Before she could ask what he meant, the door at the back of the hall opened again. Liz walked in, violin case in hand. "Sorry I'm late," she called. Faculty meeting ran over. She joined them, setting her case on a chair. "Did Richard tell you about our idea?" Mei Lin looked between them, confused. "What idea?" Professor Harmon cleared his throat. "We thought perhaps for the recital you might prefer not to play with a recorded accompaniment." "We could put together a small chamber group," Liz explained enthusiastically. "I play violin. David from science is actually an excellent cellist, and Richard here." I could provide the orchestral reduction on a second piano, he finished. Maylin stared at them. You want to perform with me? Only if you're comfortable with it, Liz added quickly. But we thought it might be nice to have living, breathing musicians supporting you rather than a recording. The offer touched something deep in Maylin. Since Tao's death, she had played alone, unable to imagine making music with others again. But the thought of being surrounded by living music, by fellow musicians who understood the language of notes and phrases. I'd need to think about it, she said finally. That night, Maylin couldn't sleep. She opened her laptop and did something she hadn't done in years. She watched videos of her performances with Tao. Their final concert together had been recorded, Brahms's Sonata for Piano and Cello. Watching. Their younger selves move in perfect harmony, communicating through subtle glances, and the music itself brought fresh tears. But mixed with the grief was something else. Appreciation for what they had created together. Gratitude for the years of music they had shared. What would you tell me to do? She whispered to Tao's image on the screen. The answer came not in words, but in memory. Tao's voice after she had been offered a prestigious solo concert. Music isn't meant to be kept to yourself, May. It's meant to be shared. The next morning she found Professor Harmon in his office. I've been thinking about your proposal, she said from the doorway. He looked up from his desk. And? I'd like to try it, playing with your chamber group, but I have a condition, which is, I don't want to play the Rachmaninoff. She took a deep breath. I'd like to play Brahms instead, the Sonata for Piano and Cello, with David on cello. Understanding dawned in Professor Harmon's eyes. That was the piece you performed with your husband. She nodded. It's time to play it again, but I can't do it alone. I understand. For once there was no trace of arrogance or challenge in his voice. We'll make it happen. As May Lin turned to leave, he added, Ms. Lin, May, thank you for trusting us with this. She gave him a small smile. We musicians have to support each other, right? That afternoon she kept her promise to Miguel, meeting his daughter Lucia after school. The girl was shy at first, wide-eyed at meeting a real concert pianist. But, as Maylene sat with her at the piano, showing her simple techniques to improve her playing, Lucia's enthusiasm blossomed. My teacher says my hands are too small to ever be really good, Lucia confessed. Maylin shook her head. That's nonsense. Look at my hands. They're not particularly large. She spread her fingers on the keys. It's not about size. It's about technique and heart. As she watched the young girl practice, Maylin felt something shift inside her, the final piece of healing clicking into place. Music had been her gift, her joy, her connection to Tao. By shutting it away, she had been shutting away the best parts of herself, the parts he had loved most. That evening, as she practiced with Liz and David for the first time, with Professor Harmon watching critically from the sidelines, Maylin felt the familiar magic of creating music with others. It wasn't the same as playing with Tao, nothing ever would be, but it was good in its own way. When they reached the emotional heart of the Brahms Sonata, Maylin closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. For the first time in 6 years, she played not from grief, but from love. Love for the music, for the memories, for the act of creation itself. And somewhere she felt sure Tao was listening. The day of the spring recital arrived with unexpected warmth, as if nature itself approved of the musical celebration about to unfold. Westfield Academy buzzed with activity, parents arriving in their finest clothes, students in formal attire rushing around with instruments, faculty making last-minute preparations. Maylin stood at her classroom window, watching the parking lot fill. Her English classes had ended early for the day, giving students time to prepare for their performances. She'd spent the morning in a daze, mechanically going through lesson plans while her mind rehearsed every note of the Brahms Sonata. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Liz poked her head in, already dressed in her concert black. Hey, just checking if you're still alive in here, she said with a smile. You missed lunch. Not hungry, Mei Lin replied, though her stomach immediately protested with a growl. Liz laughed. Your body disagrees. Here. She placed a paper bag on the desk. Sandwich and an apple. David says you need to keep your blood sugar up. Thanks. Mei Lin opened the bag, realizing she hadn't eaten since a small breakfast at dawn. How's everything going out there? Controlled chaos as usual. Professor Harmon is terrorizing the freshman string section. 2 flutes are missing, their music, and someone spilled coffee on the guestbook table. Liz perched on the edge of the desk. So, completely normal. Mei Lin smiled despite her nerves. In the week since agreeing to perform with the chamber group, she had found unexpected friendship with Liz, David, and, most surprisingly, Professor Harmon. Their rehearsals had evolved from awkward to comfortable, and finally to something approaching musical telepathy. What time should I come backstage? Mei Lin asked, taking a bite of sandwich. 6:30. We're still closing the show, as His Highness insisted. Liz rolled her eyes, but there was affection in her voice. The tension between her and Professor Harmon had eased as they worked together on this project. Has the piano been tuned? This morning, Richard, personally supervised, drove the poor tuner nearly to tears. Liz studied her face. How are you feeling? Really? Mei Lin considered the question. 6 months ago, the thought of performing in public again would have sent her into a panic attack. Even 6 weeks ago, when Professor Harmon had first challenged her, she'd agreed out of defiance rather than desire. But now? I'm nervous, she admitted. But it's the good kind of nervous, the kind that sharpens everything. Liz squeezed her hand. You're going to be amazing. See you backstage. After Liz left, Mei Lin opened her desk drawer and removed a small velvet box. Inside was a silver bracelet, a gift from Tao on their first anniversary. Tiny musical notes were etched along its length, with their initials intertwined at the I clasp. She hadn't worn it since the funeral. For courage, she whispered, echoing her words from weeks ago as she fastened it around her wrist. At 4 o'clock, she left to change at her apartment. The concert dress hanging in her closet was new, a simple, elegant design in deep blue. Her old performance gowns had been given away years ago, along with most reminders of her previous life. As she dressed, she allowed memories to surface, not pushing them away as she once had, but welcoming them like old friends. Tao adjusting his bow tie before concerts, the way he would wink at her from the wings, his ritual of kissing her hand before they walked on stage together. I wish you could be here, she said to his memory. But in a way, I guess you are. When she returned to the school, the parking lot was completely full. She slipped in through a side entrance, avoiding the growing crowd in the lobby. Backstage was indeed the controlled chaos Liz had described. Students warming up in corners, teachers giving last-minute instructions, stage crew adjusting lighting. She found David tuning his cello in a quiet dressing room. There she is, he said warmly. Our star pianist. Hardly, Mei Lin protested, though the title no longer felt as foreign as it once had. David carefully set his cello in its stand. I've been meaning to ask you something. He hesitated. The Brahms, it's a beautiful piece, but it's clearly very personal for you. Are you sure you're ready to share it? Mei Lin touched the bracelet at her wrist. No, she said honestly, but I don't think I ever will be completely ready. Some steps you just have to take before you feel prepared. Professor Harmon appeared in the doorway, immaculate in his tuxedo. 5 minutes until curtain. The house is completely full. We've had to add chairs in the back. His eyes fell on Mei Lin, and his usual stern expression softened slightly. You look the part, Ms. Lin. Thank you, I think. He cleared his throat. I wanted to let you know that I've invited someone to hear you play. An old colleague from Juilliard, now with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. They're looking for soloists for next season. Mei Lin felt a flicker of panic. You did what? Don't worry, he said quickly. No pressure. He simply expressed interest when I mentioned you were performing again. Before she could respond, a stagehand called for places, and Professor Harmon disappeared to make his opening remarks. The recital began with younger students, nervous children playing simple pieces with varying degrees of success. As the evening progressed, the performances grew more advanced. Mei Lin watched from the wings, remembering her own first recitals, the mixture of terror and exhilaration that came with sharing music. During intermission, she caught sight of Miguel, in the audience, sitting with a young girl who could only be Lucia. They waved when they spotted her, and Mei Lin waved back, touched that they had come. The second half of the program showcased the school's most accomplished musicians. When the penultimate performance ended, a talented violinist playing Paganini, Mei Lin felt her heart begin to race. Liz appeared at her side, violin in hand. "Ready?" Mei Lin nodded, unable to speak. David joined them, adjusting his cufflinks. "Remember, we're with you every step of the way." They took their positions in the wings as Professor Harmon stepped to the microphone. His commanding voice filled the hall. "Our final performance tonight is special in many ways. When I assigned Ms. Lin to play Rachmaninoff for our recital, I did so believing she was a novice, hoping perhaps to humble our new English teacher." A murmur of laughter rippled through the audience. Little did I know that hiding in our midst was one of the finest pianists of her generation. Mei Lin's breath caught as he continued. "Tonight, Mei Lin Chen returns to the stage after 6 years. She will be joined by our own David Wilson on cello and Elizabeth Torres on violin in a piece that holds deep personal significance, Brahms' Sonata for Piano and Cello, with violin accompaniment arranged by our performers. Please welcome them to the stage." As applause filled the hall, Mei Lin felt her legs grow heavy. For a moment, she couldn't move. "We're right here," Liz whispered, taking her arm. Together, they walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding at first, but as Mei Lin's eyes adjusted, she saw the packed auditorium. Students, parents, faculty, and community members all watching expectantly. She spotted Thomas giving her a thumbs up from the third row, Principal Dawson nodding encouragingly, Miguel and Lucia leaning forward in their seats, and in the back, standing against the wall, Elena from Rivera's music shop smiling proudly. The grand piano awaited center stage. Mei Lin approached it with reverence, adjusting the bench with practiced hands. David took his position beside her, Liz standing slightly behind them. The hall fell silent as Mei Lin placed her hands on the keys. In that moment of perfect stillness before the music began, panic flickered at the edges of her consciousness. What if she failed? What if the grief overwhelmed her? What if she couldn't finish? She glanced at David, who gave her a subtle nod. She looked down at the silver bracelet on her wrist, catching the stage lights. Then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening notes of the Brahms Sonata filled the hall, gentle, questioning, like the beginning of a conversation between old friends. When David's cello entered, rich and warm, Mei Lin felt a familiar presence beside her, as if Tao himself were playing. Not a ghost, not a painful memory, but a living inspiration. As the piece progressed, Mei Lin forgot about the audience, forgot about her fears. There was only the music, the conversation between piano and cello, with Liz's violin weaving a golden thread through their dialogue. They played as if they had performed together for years, each anticipating the other's breaths and pauses, building the emotional arc of the piece with perfect understanding. When they reached the passage that had always been Tao's favorite, the E moment where the piano and cello trade a haunting melody back and forth, Mei Lin felt tears on her cheeks. But her fingers never faltered, transforming grief into beauty with every note. The final movement arrived with its passionate intensity. Mei Lin poured everything into it. Her loss, her rediscovered joy, her gratitude for the second chance at the life she had abandoned. Her body swayed with the music, no longer rigid with fear but fluid with expression. As they approached the finale, she opened her eyes, meeting David's gaze across the piano. His eyes, too, were bright with emotion, understanding the gift she was sharing. Together, they brought the piece to its triumphant conclusion, the last chord resonating through the hall like a declaration. For a heartbeat after the music ended, there was complete silence. Then the audience erupted, not just applause, but a standing ovation that seemed to shake the walls. Cheers and whistles joined the thunderous clapping as Mei Lin, David, and Liz stood to acknowledge the response. Through her tears, Mei Lin saw Miguel lifting Lucia onto his shoulders so she could see better. Professor Harmon stood at the side of the stage, for once not hiding his emotions, as he applauded with genuine admiration. Thomas and the other teachers cheered from their seats. They took 3 curtain calls before the audience finally settled. As they left the stage, Professor Harmon approached, his hand extended. "Thank you," he said simply. That was beyond words. Backstage, Mei Lin was surrounded by well-wishers, students asking for impromptu lessons, parents offering congratulations, even Professor Harmon's colleague from the Boston Symphony pressing a business card into her hand with an invitation to call him. Later, as the crowd thinned and the maintenance staff began clearing the auditorium, Mei Lin returned to the empty stage. The piano stood silent now, the lid closed, the bench neatly tucked away. She ran her fingers lightly over its polished surface. "Ms. Lin?" A small voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find Lucia standing hesitantly at the edge of the stage, Miguel waiting a few steps behind. "Your playing was so beautiful," the girl said, her voice filled with awe. "Do you think I could ever play like that?" Mei Lin smiled, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "With practice and heart, you can make your own beautiful music. It doesn't have to sound like mine to be wonderful." Miguel stepped forward. "Thank you for tonight. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about becoming a pianist since you met with her." "I'm glad," Mei Lin said. "Music is a gift that should be shared." After they left, Mei Lin gathered her things, ready to head home. As she walked through the quiet school hallways, she passed her classroom. On impulse, she unlocked the door and went inside. The room looked different somehow, or perhaps she was the one who had changed. For 6 years, she had been hiding, not just from music, but from herself. Tonight, she had finally stopped running. She noticed a note on her desk, an elegant handwriting she recognized as Professor Harmon's. "Ms. Lin," it read, "whatever you decide about your musical future, know that you have already given an invaluable gift to your students and colleagues. You've shown them that it's never too late to reclaim what you love, that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. I hope you'll consider teaching both English and piano here at Westfield. We could use someone who understands that technique without heart is empty, just as heart without technique is unfulfilled." The music room next. "To yours is available." R.H. Mei Lin smiled, tucking the note into her purse. Outside, the spring night was clear, stars visible despite the campus lights. As she walked to her car, she hummed softly to herself, not Brahms or Rachmaninoff, but a simple melody Tao had composed for her on their wedding day. For the first time in 6 years, the music brought no pain, only a sweet, healing nostalgia. Tao was gone, but what they had created together, the music, the memories, the love, remained. And now, finally, she was ready to create again. The hidden virtuoso had returned, not to the grand concert halls of her past, but to a new stage where both her talents could flourish. As Mei Lin drove home, she began mentally rearranging her schedule, making room for potential piano students, considering repertoire for future performances. The story wasn't over after all. It was simply beginning a new movement.